In this episode of FullDroopTV, we install fiberglass fenders and a long travel suspension kit on the front of Project F-150. FullDroopTV starts now. This episode of FullDroopTV is brought to you in part by Swayaway.
Hey, thanks for tuning in to another episode of FullDroopTV. We have our Silverado project completed, so now we're moving on to our new project, this Ford four-wheel drive F-150. Now, if you watched our past episodes, you saw that the way we built our Silverado was as if we had all the parts laying right here in the shop. And a lot of people, because of their budgets, find it hard to build a Prerunner that way. So we're going to build this F-150 just like you would, in stages. We're going to start with our front suspension, move on to the rear suspension, add some bumpers front and rear, and the first place we're going to start is with our fiberglass fenders. So we gave Fiberwerx a call and got a set of their F-150 fiberglass, and you can see it's got a 4.5-inch bulge and a giant wheel opening, so our 37-inch Mickey Thompson tires should have no problem fitting. Another nice feature of these is they're direct bolt-on, so we shouldn't have any troubles installing them. So let's get the teardown going so we can get these installed.
In order to install our Fiberwerx fiberglass fenders, the first thing we need to do is remove the factory fenders. And we're going to start with this plastic trim. It's held in by one-way plastic clips, and we're not going to reuse it, so we're not really worried about them. Using a 5.5mm socket, remove the screws that attach the inner fender. Remove the two 10mm bolts for the valence bracket. Next, remove the headlight. Using a 10mm ratchet, remove the bolts holding the headlight in place. To remove the fender, start with this 8mm bolt hiding behind the headlights. Using a 10mm socket, remove the bolt that's tucked inside the fender. Using a long extension, use an 8mm socket to reach through the door jamb to this inner fender bolt. The last three bolts that we need to remove are these two 8mm bolts here and this one that doubles as the strut mount. Now remember, the strut holds the weight of the hood up, so if you remove it, make sure you either prop the hood up or have someone hold it while you're taking off your fender. We've checked our hood clearance, and we have a nice even gap all the way down the fender line. We've marked out our mounting holes. Fiberwerx designs these fenders to reuse the factory mounting location and hardware. So all we have to do is drill these holes out and get it reinstalled on the truck. For the lower mount on our Fiberwerx fenders, again we're going to be reusing the factory hardware. Mark out the two bolt hole locations, drill that out, and reinstall the fender. For the mount behind our headlight, we're going to be using a sheet metal screw. We've lowered the valance out of the way to gain access. We're going to drill a pilot hole and then follow it up with that sheet metal screw. The last piece of hardware to install is the mount for our factory hood strut. Tighten it up. Snap on the hood strut. And you're good to go. To start the teardown process, we're going to begin with the steering ball joint. Then we're going to show you step by step how to remove all the factory suspension components to make room for our Dixon Bros Racing long travel kit. So we're going to start with this nut and a 21mm socket. Tap out the ball joint using a hammer. Remove the vacuum line for the four-wheel drive hub from the back of the spindle. Remove the two brake caliper bolts using an 18mm socket. We need to remove the axles from the truck, and in order to do that, we need to pop this cap off to gain access to the nut behind it. Using a 13mm socket, remove the nut. Using a 21mm socket, remove the nut holding the ball joint in place. Use an 18mm socket to remove the 4 bolts holding the hub to the spindle. Remove the hub. Remove the sway bar end link using a 15mm socket. Use a 15mm socket to remove the 3 nuts holding the coilover shock in place. If you're doing this by yourself like I am, and you don't want to carry all this weight, you can loosen up the A-arm bolts and roll this down real nice and slow. Use a 21mm socket to remove the upper control arm. You can see with our factory suspension components out of the way, we have plenty of room to access our 6 bolts holding on the axle. Use a 12-point 12mm socket to remove all of those bolts.
Now that the teardown is complete on our factory suspension, it's time to get our long travel kit installed. Now, if you're building a four-wheel drive pre-runner like we are, you're limited on the choices that you have of companies that make a long travel kit and still give you the ability to retain four-wheel drive. But we were in luck when we found this kit from Dixon Bros Racing, so we gave them a call and they sent us one of their 04 to 08 F-150 kits. You can see we've got fully boxed lower control arms, we've got tubular upper control arms, a fully fabricated upper shock mount, and since this kit is 4.5 inches wider per side, they also provide you with longer axle shafts. Now, another part of this kit is this upper shock brace that goes over the engine and ties the 2 points together. Now, we wanted to take a closer look at these lower control arms, the ones provided by Dixon Bros and then the factory ones. Now, you can see a huge difference between the lower control arms provided by Dixon Bros Racing and what you get from Ford. Now, these from Ford are made out of cast aluminum, where the Dixon Bros is made out of plate steel. They're internally gusseted for extra strength. Now, when you order your Dixon kit, it's going to come with a basic color, but we wanted something a little more custom. So we contacted AR Powder Coating and we had them lay down this nice silver color. Now, AR Powder Coating went through a 4-step process. The first is the sandblast to help the powder coating stick better. Then they laid down a nice primer. Then it came our silver powder coating. And then to finish things off, they laid down a matte clear to tone down some of the sparkle that was in this silver. So if you want more information about the powder coating process, visit FullDroopTV.com. For shocks, we contacted Swayaway for a set of their 2.5-inch by 10-inch Race Runner coilovers. You can see they feature a remote reservoir that holds more oil for more cooling. The body itself has a cadmium finish, and all these aluminum pieces are red anodized. Now, something we needed that was unique for our install were these extended lower eyelets. This gives us the clearance that we need for our 4-wheel drive axle shafts. Now, for springs, we contacted Eibach for a set of their 18-inch long, 800-pound springs. And this silver powder-coated finish goes great with our shocks. When your suspension compresses, you want to do something to limit it so that it doesn't go into bind. Now, we're going to do that with a set of these 2-inch hydraulic bump stops that we got from Swayaway. They slide into these cans, and it's going to get mounted somewhere here on the frame. Now, we won't know the exact positioning until we get the rest of the suspension installed, but this will give you an idea of where it's going to land. Now, conversely, when your suspension fully droops out, you also want to limit it, and we're going to do that with these limit straps that we got from Butch's Speed Shop of Las Vegas. Now we're going to show you just how easy it is to get this Dixon Brothers long travel kit installed on our F-150.
To install our Dixon Bros Racing long travel kit, we're going to reuse the factory hardware, starting with the lower control arm. Next, install the axle shaft. Be sure to use thread locker on the 6 bolts that hold the axle to the flange. Using a 12mm 12-point socket, tighten all the axle flange bolts. I'm using a jack to support the lower arm. That'll help me install the spindle, starting with the lower ball joint. Install the factory hub and use an 18mm socket to tighten the 4 bolts holding the hub in place. Use a 13mm socket to tighten the nut on the outside of the axle shaft snout. Before we mount our Swayaway coilovers, we need to bolt in this fabricated shock mount that comes in the Dixon Bros Racing kit. Now, it uses 3 of the factory coilover bolt locations, but you'll have to drill out the 4 remaining locations to utilize all the bolts to bolt this in place. We're using 7 3/8 grade 8 bolts to hold the shock tower in place. The last major part of the Dixon Bros long travel kit is this tubular upper control arm. Slide it into the pocket and use the factory bolts. Once you get them in place, drop the ball joint into the spindle and tighten it up. Dixon Bros provides you with an extension for your factory steering. We've removed the ball joint off of the tie rod. We're going to clamp it in a vise. Use some thread locker. Thread in the steering extension. And tighten it using a 13/16 wrench. With any long travel kit, you're going to need to run longer brake lines. So we contacted Crown Performance for their 9+ kit. That gives us front and rear brake lines that are 9 inches longer than stock, and we ordered ours in this smoke finish. The only part of the Dixon Bros Racing kit that requires welding is this removable shock tower brace. It passes from one shock tower up and over the engine back down to the other to disperse the load evenly between the two. Once we get it tacked in place, we'll unbolt it, remove it, and weld it on the bench. In order to install our bump stops and our limit straps, we have to be able to cycle the suspension freely, and we can't do that with the coil in place. So we're going to remove the coil and then bolt the shock back into its original location. That way we can cycle the suspension and check for any binding or tire clearance issues. Well, as you can see, with our suspension in the fully compressed position, we have plenty of clearance for our tires and our suspension's not binding. So now we know exactly where to mount our bump stop cans to the frame. The bump stop cans we got from Swayaway come just like this. We needed to add 2 plates to either side so we could weld it into the frame. As you can see, I've already done that here. Now the reason I already welded these plates on is because you never want to weld to the bump stop can with the bump stop installed. So now that it's all cool, I can slip the bump stop into the can and get it tacked in place. To mount our limit straps, I've cut out a tab that's going to get welded into the frame. Now from that approximate location down to the welded tab that's on the lower arm, I took that measurement and determined I need a 14-inch limit strap. Now with a 14-inch limit strap, you're going to get stretch over time. So what I did to account for that is brought in a floor jack underneath the suspension. Instead of leaving it at full droop, I decided to bring the suspension up so that way I'm not going to get any bind in any of the ball joints. With this set in the correct position, all that's left is welded into the frame.
FDTV Talk is presented by Prerunner Maniac.
I want to get more travel out of my rear suspension. Can y'all make any suggestions?
That's a great question, Mike. When you're thinking of which type of suspension you want on your Prerunner, you basically have 2 options for the rear. You have a link type suspension, which involves a lot of fabrication and a lot of parts, and it's something you might see on a race truck, but the good thing about that is it'll net you about 30 inches of travel. Now for most street trucks and Prerunners, you're going to want to go with a set of these Deaver leaf springs. They're a multi-leaf pack with a very progressive rate, so they'll keep up with you in the desert. And using these leaf springs in conjunction with a bed cage, you're going to get about 16 inches of travel. So I hope that answers your question, Mike. And remember, if you have a question you want answered on air, visit FullDroopTV.com and click on the FDTV Talk icon. Stage 1 of our F-150 project is complete, and if you remember in the beginning of this episode, we told you we're going to be building this F-150 just like you would, in stages. We've got our Dixon Brothers long travel kit installed, and in conjunction with our Swayaway coilovers and bump stops, we should get us about 14 inches of travel with the four-wheel drive still intact. Now, all this suspension work would do us no good if we didn't have a good set of wheels and tires. So we contacted KMC for a set of their 17x9 attic wheels that feature this matte black finish on the outside with this machine finish spoke. And we wrapped them in these Mickey Thompson 37-inch Baja MTZ tires. Now, since we're running such a large tire, we needed plenty of room up front, and these Fiberwerx fenders give us that room. In our next episode, we're going to be tackling the rear of this F-150. We're going to install our fiberglass bedsides from Fiberwerx and install our D-relief springs. So be sure to stay tuned, and if you have any questions about any of the products that we use on this episode, visit FullDroopTV.com. We wrapped them in bacon.
So when you remove it, for the lower mount on our Fiberwerx fenders, I forgot what to say. To check for any binding or tie-ins.
Thank you.
Vroom, vroom.